Okay, if you guys are ready to get started, I'm ready to get started. My name is Amy Jaramillo. I am the scientific director at Body Science. And today we're just talking about some new developments. Most of you already know our primary focus is neurodegenerative disease and specifically ALS. And I've been trying over the course of the last couple of months to get on more often and describe what we're doing, what we're seeing, and answer questions. And so, to that point today, let me start by kind of giving a sense of where we have been since the last call. And then I'll switch over for any questions that anybody has. If you've seen the couple of Zoom calls that I've done recently, I've been describing what we have referred to as the astrocyte protocol. And if you'd wanted more information, there's the last two Zoom calls or videos describing it. So I won't go nearly as in depth. What I would like to do is take a little bit of time just to refresh on where that idea came from and the continued success that we're seeing from a symptom point of view. What happened, I had been focusing very singularly on motor neurons, not really recognizing the role that the supportive cells, the non-neuron cells in the brain and spinal cord play in motor neuron damage and disease. And so, although it's an area that's well understood, glial cells and their involvement in motor neuron health, I continued to look really in motor neurons, which I think is where a lot of other folks have been and are probably as well making a mistake, meaning a focus that's so narrow rather than seeing motor neurons as neurons that become damaged over time as a result of other cellular failures. I had looked at it as if motor neurons were kind of the be all, end all of what's going on. And then August, September of this last year, I started getting more focused on the infections and the toxins that we were treating because of their relationship with motor neuron disease. We had already seen a significant number of improvements. And it didn't change the fact that we still had plenty of non-responders. And there was discussion during that time and some information that was published by October of this last year describing one infection in particular associated with motor neuron disease or ALS that's in the microglial cells. So microglia, they are in the neural network, meaning they are non-neurons, but cells that are very important in keeping neurons healthy, getting rid of, in microglia in that case, getting rid of infections in motor neurons and then repairing that neuron afterwards, and other neurons as well, not neurons that are not just motor neuron. I started focusing on the other glial cells, so astrocytes became a really important focus of mine, and oligodendrocytes. So again, I broadened my focus from this is a motor neuron related disease, everything that's going on must be in the motor neuron, to instead the approach of how is a motor neuron staying healthy? Who's doing the repair? Who's tackling the infections? Who's providing the organelles like the mitochondria? How are you getting the myelination and maintaining its health? And that search led me into symptoms that I was struggling to, number one, understand, and number two, get consistent outcomes or improvements in. And at the top of that list was voice. And so voice or speech is something that I've been working on for a period of time, but with inconsistent outcomes. So improvements in some, total lack of improvements in others, and not understanding why I was seeing improvements in some people. In other words, what's the actual key or the switch? I developed the astrocyte protocol with that in mind, and I had thought that what I would see was speech improvements. We started in November, and the surprise, at least for me, not just the speech and swallowing improvements, but almost across the board, improvements in hand strength and fine motor coordination, and improvement in walking, especially when the reason for difficulty with walking is not just weakness, but more specifically, rigidity or spasticity, right? Legs that are stiff and people that have general stiffness. And so I'll tell you where I have been since the last Zoom call. We routinely use stem cells and in combination with those other programs. So in this case, astrocyte. And the question is whether or not there would be a way to improve stem cell production in that individual and improve the health of damaged neurons. Now, I know for a lot of folks, the way that you're looking at improving stem cell population is autophagy. And I know for a lot of people, they relate autophagy to either plunge pools, so super cold, hyperthermia, so super hot, intermittent fasting. So shocking cells can, in fact, trigger autophagy. Except when folks have advanced chronic illnesses, sometimes that autophagy switch will not switch on even with radical temperature or starvation related changes. And so then the question still, how do we improve stem cell production and how do we improve the health and the repair of neurons? And over the last maybe year, a lot of the things that I've looked at and a lot of the things that we have used have already been trialed and shown benefit in ALS, but were born or developed in the world of oncology. And so looking through oncology, imagine there are a number of medications and radiation as well that destroy bone marrow and the resulting stem cells. And my question was, what are those folks doing? And have any of those strategies been tried in motor neuron disease to build more cells, to increase the immune system by building more white cells, to increase the population of stem cells, and as an unexpected benefit in clinical trials to show neuron support and regeneration? So again, what I was looking to do, we are already seeing that by improving what we think is the astrocyte profile and ability of the astrocyte to work. So saying that differently, using a medication that has already been shown to improve mitochondrial health in astrocytes, and then seeing clinical improvements, primarily again, speech, fine motor coordination, walking, swallowing. I know you guys have probably seen a number of people that have already described, for example, swallowing easier or not needing as much water or not choking on water, being able to lay flat and still breathe, being able to hold a head up much more easily. And so from my vantage point, in order for this to last, we need a strong regenerative strategy, meaning if we already have control over infections or during this period we're getting control. So just taking a step back and describing the fact that if we are treating infections or chemicals, we can do that simultaneously. But I don't know that just treating infections or eliminating toxins is adequate. I think plenty of people with motor neuron disease have done all kinds of treatments with the intention of eradicating infections and reducing toxins, and in spite of that fact, have not shown improvement or have not shown lasting improvement. And for me, the piece of that puzzle that was missing, it's the regenerative strategy. So even once you do remove a toxin or you do remove the infections, how do you regenerate damaged tissue? How do you repair damaged pathways that result from those infections and those chemicals. And so now going back to the idea of stem cells, we have been using them for since 2019 and have been seeing some impressive results, and commonly we'll pair them with our other strategies. So for example, an astrocyte protocol that also has stem cells, and we'll go ahead and administer them intrathecally the same way as a clinical trial would administer them. Still, it comes down to autophagy being the holy grail, right? So can cells decide when it's time to remove themselves from a population and allow stem cells to rotate in order to make new healthy cells? And can cells repair themselves adequately? And since a lot of the autophagy strategies that work in folks that do not have chronic illnesses do not work in people that do have chronic illnesses, meaning shocking cells in individuals with chronic inflammatory conditions oftentimes just worsens degree of adrenal fatigue that's already in play. So taking somebody that doesn't have any kind of medical issue, any kind of medical history, and putting them through kind of a cellular shock approach to get to autophagy is not only reasonable, but proven to be effective. Taking somebody that already has cortisol dysfunction and a degree of adrenal fatigue because that body has been dealing with chronic amounts of inflammation, and then trying to shock those cells, oftentimes they don't have that bandwidth and are not effective at moving into autophagy or coming out of senescence. So again, what I was looking to add, and just kind of trying to find the perfect piece for it, a way to increase stem cell production, as well as increase immune surveillance by kind of bolstering the white cell community. Remember, white cells are oftentimes a little on the low side in folks that have motor neuron disease because of these chronic low-level infections. And again, as well, if we could find a way in that whole mix to improve neurons and neuron health. So as an update, because that's always what I'm trying to do, as our most recent update, we have just added that into the program. I think we know from the clinical trials already, we would expect to see even more improvement than we have been seeing. Right behind that, what I'm in the process of doing, because we're talking about astrocytes, and because we're talking about damaged astrocytes, and as a reminder, astrocytes are in the support network. They are non-neurons, but they support neurons, right? And so in the brain and spinal cord, astrocytes are going to help supply the mitochondria, the calcium that's required for mitochondria to work, and antioxidants. So they do those things primarily. The question with astrocytes, what would damage them? How'd you get this in the first place? How does a perfectly healthy person start developing motor neuron damage? And everybody knows, I know I say this all the time, but everybody knows motor neuron disease and ALS, whichever acronym you want to use, I see those as symptoms. And so the objective is find the root cause in order to manage some type of therapy and navigate those symptoms. And so then the question is, if the premise is that astrocyte involvement for the astrocyte protocol, right, versus a microglial protocol versus an oligodendrocyte protocol. And a lot of that has to do with what people look like and their clinical presentation. So a common way that astrocytes can become damaged is with a group of elements that are referred to as halides. So chlorine, fluorine, bromine. I'm not talking about the low levels common in the water supply. I'm talking about high levels due to contamination. And so just as we're pairing up a stem cell builder, and again, it's not just stem cells, it is an approach that improves neuron protection and neuron healing, as well as bolstering white cells and stem cells. So right along with that, we're putting together a combination of materials, in this case, supplements that help remove halides, chlorine, fluorine, bromine, that may have attacked and ultimately damaged astrocytes. So again, on our side, always the goal is figure out how did you develop motor neuron disease on the Zoom call. So that's always a first step. That's the objective, is to figure out what do you look like? What do your symptoms present like? How did they progress? And which area do we think is damaged and creating the symptom of motor neuron involvement? So using that as the premise and then reverse engineering motor neuron disease in an individual that has rigidity, fine motor coordination issues, speaking, swallowing, breathing issues, mood related issues. So again, putting this potentially in the bucket of astrocytes, then continuing with the reverse engineering strategy, the obvious question is what would damage astrocytes versus a presentation that's more microglial and the kinds of infections that are known to destroy them. All right, so what I want to do with today's call is just bring everybody up to speed on the fact that we have something, we're seeing those improvements, we've already put them out there in videos over the last couple of weeks, so I'm sure you've already seen, and the first was in November, and that person is continuing to show improvement and just put a video out last week. So I don't know that I need to go through what do the improvements look like, but rather provide insight to what we are creating as an add-on to that protocol in order to get, I don't know, better, faster, longer lasting improvements. And we know that the folks that we worked with in November are continuing to show improvement. And still the question always in the world of motor neuron, how do we get there faster? I'm trying to think if there's anything else that is brand new that I want to talk about. And nothing really comes to mind. We're working on a bunch of things, but usually for me, I get on and just talk for the course of an hour and a half, and it's so technical. I'm trying not to do that this time around. And so I will answer any questions, and then I'll probably wrap us up after another 10 minutes, unless we don't have any questions. So what I'm going to try and get better at is making sure that we use this as a format, not just to discuss new things that we're doing, but also answer questions. And to just tag on one last point to these protocols, we've been working very diligently to come up with better and better cellular matrix for the stem cells that we administer intrathecally. So I think having a protocol that targets a certain area of damage in cells that are supportive for motor neurons, using stem cells when we have the option, and having a better stem cell matrix that looks to be even more effective. Moving forward, supporting that with a medication or a strategy, a combination of things that has already been shown to have improvement in motor neuron disease by helping to create those stem cells, right? And then removing the halide damage or toxicity from those cells looks to kind of give you a full picture. One additional point before I look for any questions, we have been using neural therapy. So it's when you use a short-lived, short half-life anesthetic agent at certain ganglions or cell body areas to control certain things, in some cases, sympathetic overdrive. And so you may see in some of the videos folks that have Band-Aid right over there because of that neural therapy. I do want to let you know, because I've gotten a lot of questions about people doing neural therapy at home. The way I came up with the idea of neural therapy, and we made multiple modifications to how we're injecting and the medications that we're using to really get to the results that we have now. But when I initially started with that idea, it's because there was already a paper describing the potential for sympathetic overdrive to present in the form of speaking, swallowing, breathing, and mood changes in people that have ALS. And so controlling that sympathetic overdrive for me felt reasonable. Having said that, plenty of people have used either ganglion blocks or neural therapy to try and impact or improve symptoms of not just motor neuron disease, but neurodegenerative. I would say for all the folks that are calling and asking if they should get it, I don't think so. I don't think it works as a monotherapy. The example that I use commonly in clinic, it would be no different in my estimation than using a short-acting anesthetic to block any kind of nerve overfiring. So I think about tooth pain, and I think about using, like a dental block, Novocaine, and putting it over there, but not repairing the tooth. So you go to the dentist, they do the injection, you have the numbness, so you don't feel the tooth pain anymore. Nobody actually addresses the problem with the tooth. Instead, at some point, a couple of hours later, that Novocaine wears off and the pain comes back. So on our side, as a center, we're not making a recommendation to just block sympathetic overdrive or do other ganglion blocks. Instead, we are looking at the benefits and have already seen the benefits of improving the outcome of the astrocytes and their ability to support motor neurons. We can't see that through testing. If anybody has a suggestion of how to measure that, I am up for it. But what we can see is the clinical outcome improvement. And we know that we're using medications that are designed to increase mitochondrial health in astrocytes. So that's how we draw that conclusion. And then once we have that pathway arranged and we have astrocytes doing what they should, and we have better regulation over acetylcholine, then we like to add that additional pathway adjustment or correction with a short-acting block to gain sympathetic control or to balance sympathetic to parasympathetic and prevent sympathetic overdrive. So for anybody that's on this call that's wondering, should you do a bunch of ganglion blocks? I think it's been tried many times over the years and has not been shown to be successful. So we're not looking for a strategy like that. Instead, it's kind of a combination. Also, for everybody can hear the noise in the background, there are some folks doing tons of construction. I did not anticipate that before I got on the call. So you can hear all that noise. I'm sorry, guys. All right. So now let me just get a sense. Do we have any questions? Let me put my glasses on. And if we do, again, whether it's about this kind of thing, astrocyte protocol, or whether it's just about anything else that you want to talk about, diet, exercise, I'm happy to answer whatever you guys want to talk about. It's a quiet group. It's a pretty big group. And in spite of that, so far, no questions. Well, again, I would love to talk further, but I don't know what you guys want to talk about. So let me give it another 30 seconds. But if we don't have anything as far as questions in that period of time, then what I'll plan to do is get back on in another couple of weeks with our next update and continue to be on the lookout for more and more patient videos, people just describing their improvements. I think that's probably the best way to get clear on what we're seeing here in the improvements in ALS. All right, let me check one more time. It's a first. I don't know that I've ever had a time where I check questions. Okay, there's one question. All right, let me take a look. Have we tried to do homeopathic research? Yeah. Sometimes I'm asked the question whether we're a traditional clinic, meaning allopathic or prescription medication, whether we like naturopathic solutions, whether we use herbal remedies, whether we use Chinese medicine, Western medicine. I would tell you, this clinic, we are not focused on a single area of medicine. We really are a blend. We use lots of herbals. We have some that are IVs. Artemisinin is probably a good example of that. And curcumin IVs. We use plenty of prescription medication, so I'm not opposed to that. We use Ayurvedic medicine. We use philosophies sometimes from Chinese medicine as far as damp versus dry, sluggish, versus movement, just as examples. even using Bible medicine. So Bible medicine is, as it sounds, looking at the information that's been written up about herbs used so many years ago and seeing that they still have benefit. An example of that is probably mistletoe and its use in oncology, or the benefits of things like frankincense. And so on our side, we don't really have a limit or an approach to stay within one area of medicine. Instead, I think what is true, I think every area of health and wellness that has shown benefit is something that should be considered. And so we typically roll everything into a multi-pronged strategy. Okay, let me see. There's a second question. Oh, hey, Craig, we were just talking, you and me, on email. So your question, anything that we recommend prior to the astrocyte protocol other than the 2 peptides? Well, here's my thing. Those 2 peptides for me become the most important. Remember, they are designed to support mitochondrial function and support longevity, general health and longevity. And so before we get in on our side, once you get down here and work on improving the cells that are providing a majority of mitochondria to the motor neuron, building those mitochondria at home for me becomes really important. There's a couple of things that I like, and they are the supplements. Anybody that knows me knows I'm not a big fan of using a lot of supplements, but there are a handful that become, I think, very important. And so the things that I would recommend, I like sodium bicarb, controlling a pH and boosting it prior to astrocytes and allowing medication to penetrate cells more effectively based on pH becomes important. So there's something I use, the office has it, it's called bicarb supreme, and that for me is very important. I like chaperone 1, so I think everybody is clear, and for anybody that isn't, about the relationship of TUDCA and neurodegenerative diseases. So there is an acid, a bile acid that is made in the liver. It is sent to the intestines and conjugated. The taurine on it is conjugated, and that is the material that's known by the acronym TUDCA. It's been proven. I mean, it has such a long history of proven benefit in neurodegenerative disease, including ALS. For me, I like a specific bile acid from the entire gland, which is the gallbladder. And for that reason, I typically pair up chaperone 1 with TUDCA so we can get that balance of the 2 acids, which we have found adds even more benefit to TUDCA. So I like chaperone 1. And then there is an amino acid powder that we like over here. It's because it was used in a study where a large group of individuals who were entirely bedridden were given that combination of amino acids, and what they were able to measure, the researchers were able to measure improved muscle health and strength. And so that is called, I always get this backwards, it's either Amino Supreme or Supreme Aminos, and I don't recall which. All right, so Craig, to your point, anything else that would go on board? Yeah, I like pH control and moving pH more in the higher or more alkalinized direction, or at least to get it to, a neutral. So the sodium plus potassium bicarb, I'm not a fan of just sodium bicarb by itself. So sodium and potassium bicarb, which is bicarb supreme, the amino acid combination, and chaperone 1. And our recommendation for folks that come on over here will normally ask that get added to a regimen of TUDCA, which again is the reminder for anybody that isn't taking TUDCA, you may want to reconsider. So what I would say is, I'm not a physician, and so I'm not trying to provide medical advice. So I say that right up front, or make claims that these things work, but just asking what have we seen and what would we like to have on board ahead of time, those things. And so I think they might be on our website, but you can find them, BioMyQ, you can find their products on a number of other sites as well, right? And then let me say, so if we focus or tell patients regarding having a diet full of fruits or cooked foods, does it help? My personal observation is if we do fasting, it could help. Okay, so as far as fruits, let's just start there. Remember, the relationship of blood sugar dysfunction in people that have neurodegenerative disease, and particularly ALS, is commonly referred to as a paradoxical relationship, meaning motor neurons and all neurons need an amount of sugar to kind of start their engine, like glycolysis, but then they're going to switch to fatty acid oxidation. The challenge with a lot of folks that have motor neuron disease, they can't adequately get sugar into the cell. So it's an insulin or insulin receptor related issue. And for that reason, people that have motor neuron disease may, in fact, have a higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes, in spite of the fact that oftentimes we're looking at healthy diets and very lean body mass. And so when it comes to fruits, I mean, one thing that is true, a rainbow diet concept. So rainbow diet is eating things with lots of different colors to get the most number of vitamins and minerals. And so that's almost always going to be fruits and vegetables. What you want to be careful of is the sugar. And you want to be careful of how you're eating them, meaning you're never going to blend anything because now you're breaking down the fiber and making it into a simple carbohydrate or a fast releasing sugar. So what we recommend is a small amount, so under 10% of any plate, rainbow diet of the most complex carbohydrates, the lowest glycemic index. And so if we're looking at high glycemic index, so things where you eat them and the sugar gets into your bloodstream, but the pancreas really can't catch up fast enough to make insulin. And so the sugar sits outside of the cell and damages the cell. So that's high glycemic. Low glycemic is if there is any sugar. And so sugar is in a carbohydrate, meaning anything that you're eating that is not a protein or a fat is a carbohydrate. So whether it is broccoli or lettuce, whether we're talking about beans, anything again that is not a fat or protein is a carbohydrate. And so you always want to be low glycemic and try and get the most nutrient density. So I don't like a high fruit diet, to the point of the question. As far as intermittent fasting, what we know about intermittent fasting, we know in folks that are healthy, intermittent fasting looks to promote autophagy and the resulting longevity. We know that when people are sick, depending on the illness, certain conditions improve with intermittent fasting. So that model, for example, diabetes type 2 looks to improve, and you can even gain control and sometimes reverse, or so the studies have shown, by intermittently fasting for type 2 diabetics. There are certain inflammatory conditions, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis. There is a suggestion that supports very definitely the idea of intermittent fasting. The challenge in motor neuron disease, it doesn't mean that you can't intermittent fast. It does mean with chronic inflammatory neurodegenerative disease, oftentimes adrenal fatigue is present. And so I would suggest understanding the degree or the extent of the cortisol dysfunction in determining whether or not you want to intermittently fast and for what length of time. Remember, what you want to do is you want to make sure that your cells very definitely have the cofactors to drive reactions. You're looking at inefficiency in the cells that's limiting how cells can perform their day-to-day tasks. Because the cofactors that drive those reactions are largely the vitamins and minerals that come out of a diet, you would never want to reduce caloric intake or limit it for a period of time that would be significant enough that would interfere with cellular function that is already struggling. And so I don't think it's an across the board decision about intermittently fasting. I think before you take on something like that, again, you do want to get a sense of whether or not you have adrenal fatigue. That typically is done through a cortisol and DHEA test. And you may as well want to run a nutrition panel, because if you know that you have certain nutritional depletions, And if you do decide that you are still going to intermittently fast, you may still want to supplement key nutrition where you have depletions that are critical for motor neuron function. Okay. And then, oh yeah, Craig, I'm happy to, and I'm looking forward to seeing you too. Oh, Carol, so your question, how much bicarb, and your question is how much sodium bicarb. Just be aware, I don't like sodium bicarb by itself. It's too much sodium. And so what you can see is blood pressure changes as a result, and water retention. And so I like sodium and potassium. So sodium bicarb along with potassium bicarb. So I like both of those salts mixed. You're going to be here next week. And so we can take a look together at dosing, always for me. And just know sodium bicarb and sodium potassium bicarb, it comes directly out of an athletic protocol. So there are a number of athletes that use bicarbonate in order to improve muscle strength, muscle health, and muscle endurance. So the idea of bicarb or alkalinizing a body in order to promote muscle strength and health has been around for a long time. The key is getting the ratio of sodium to potassium and as well taking it at the right time. So the right time for me is empty stomach first thing in the morning, empty stomach at the end of the day, and with each meal to ensure that meals don't acidify the body. And so for a lot of people, the way that they're looking at it is acid is something that would be in an acidic food. So people think about coffee, for example, or tomatoes, and people that have acid reflux know to stay away from acidic foods like pizza because of the tomato sauce, because it will cause acid reflux. What you may not know is bread and dairy, just as two examples, can be very acidic and acidify the body. And so having a sodium potassium bicarb with each meal in order to keep pH either neutral or slightly alkalinized. And again, to alkalinize first thing in the morning and end of the day is what's recommended. Now, what I would say, just to add on to it, again, I don't love the idea of supplements. Whole food for me is always a good option. And so an interesting and effective way to alkalinize or raise pH in the morning is warm water, not hot, but kind of like a warmish water with lemon. And so although lemon has acetic acid, it alkalinizes. And that's why there have been a number of cultures, for, I don't know, thousands of years that have used warm lemon water in the morning and after meals to alkalinize and prevent that high acid environment, which is an environment where infections or pathogens can thrive and muscle and neurons have a hard time. And so you may want to also add in that warm water with lemon. Make sure your water's clean, right? So I'd never use just tap water, and make sure that your lemons are organic. And make sure if you're putting the rind of the lemon in, you know where that lemon came from. So you're not just adding pesticide into a warm glass of water. But throughout the day, alkalinizing is a way to promote muscle strength, which is why a sodium bicarb mixed with a potassium bicarb is used so commonly for increased athletic performance. Okay. I think those are all of our questions for the day. Okay, let me give it just another 10 seconds for anybody that may have a question that hasn't put it up yet. And then if I don't see anything at that point, I will sign off for now. And so again, Carol, it's not so much just the dosing, it's the frequency, it's the time that you're doing it in order to provide an alkalinized or basic, right? Those two terms are interchangeable, or higher pH environment in the body. All right. Well, you guys are out of questions. And so what I will do, I'll plan to get back on in another couple of weeks and give you even more updates. All right. I'll see you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.